Good evening. The date is Sunday, February 22, 2026. From the frozen front lines of the Donbass to the gridlock negotiation tables in Geneva, the geopolitical temperature is rising, even as the mercury falls.
We are reporting tonight on a convergence of kinetic escalation and diplomatic stalemate in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. This is the Deep Dive.
Brought to you by ProWave AI. Tonight, we aim to step back from the immediate headlines and provide a clear, factual overview of the patterns shaping this region.
And to do that, we are relying on intelligence and reporting aggregated through Stylo News.
Right, which is an important piece of context for you, our listeners. Stylo News is the AI-powered consumer application of Stylo Intel Ops,
Which is the enterprise software designed for government, military, and business operations.
Exactly. So what you are getting here is unique access to the same caliber of information that global decision makers use to track these events. We're looking at the raw data, the sentiment, and the tactical shifts.
Stripping away the sensationalism to just look at the facts on the ground. And the facts from the last 24 hours are quite stark.
They really are. Let's get right into the battlefield update. The lull we saw earlier this month is decisively over.
It is. Between February 21st and 22nd, Russia launched a massive, coordinated barrage of missiles and drones.
And the target selection here is key. They weren't primarily aiming at frontline military depots. They targeted Kyiv and the surrounding regions, specifically hitting energy and rail infrastructure.
Which is a classic strategic suffocation tactic. I mean, you hit the rail lines to choke the logistics, to stop the flow of Western hardware moving east.
But hitting the power grid in late February, that is aimed squarely at the civilian population.
Yes, it creates widespread power outages during a genuinely harsh winter. It's an attrition of morale as much as infrastructure.
And we also need to address the incident in Lviv. This stood out in the Stylo intelligence feed because we usually think of Lviv in western Ukraine as a rear guard.
Right, it's typically the safe haven for refugees and diplomats, but the sources are describing a quote-unquote terrorist attack there that resulted in the death of a police officer and dozens of injuries.
By striking Lviv and specifically targeting local law enforcement, the tactical message is that there really is no rear guard anymore.
It shatters that sense of security far from the zero line. And all of this kinetic activity is happening while the entire region is in the grip of record low temperatures.
General winter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But not the way we read about it in 20th century history books. This isn't just about mud slowing down supply trucks or troops needing better gear.
No, we are looking at the physics of modern warfare. The reports highlight a massive variable right now, which is battery chemistry.
Right. Lithium-ion batteries absolutely degrade in extreme cold. And when your entire defensive and reconnaissance strategy relies on battery-powered drones, that is a severe vulnerability.
Anyone who drives an electric vehicle knows about voltage drop in the winter. But on the battlefield, that translates to losing your eyes in the sky.
It's a tactical nightmare. The conductivity in those cells just drops off a cliff at sub-zero temperatures. A drone that is rated to loiter for 40 minutes might only stay airborne for 10.
Or the optics themselves literally freeze over.
Exactly. The cameras ice up, the rotors sluggishly respond, commanders are effectively going blind in certain sectors.
And yet, the Ukrainian forces are still utilizing these drone tactics effectively where they can. They are adapting.
They are, but the friction is immense. And despite this technological bottleneck, the human cost is accelerating.
The NATO disclosures that just came through are, well, they're sobering.
Staggering, really. NATO estimates Russian casualties have surged to approximately 1.3 million killed or wounded since the conflict began.
1.3 million. And the acceleration is what really stands out in the Stylo data. 400,000 of those occurred in 2025 alone.
It's a level of attrition that would completely hollow out a standard modern military force.
Which explains the shift in alliances we are seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Russia is having to backfill those numbers, and they're looking east to do it.
Specifically to North Korea. We are currently tracking approximately 10,000 North Korean soldiers deployed to Russia.
This stems from that mutual defense treaty they signed back in June of 2024.
Right. But it is a highly transactional arrangement. Pyongyang is sending these troops to gain direct combat experience in modern hybrid warfare. They are learning how to operate against Western technology.
And in exchange.
In exchange, Russia is providing advanced military hardware. The report specifically mentioned the transfer of Panzer air defense systems to North Korea.
So it's a trade. Manpower for advanced surface-to-air technology. It truly turns the region into a testing ground for global adversaries.
Which seamlessly brings us to the diplomatic push, or rather, the lack thereof over the past few days.
Yes, let's transition to the political theater. The Geneva talks,
Mhm.
which ran from February 17th to the 19th.
This was a trilateral effort. You had Ukraine represented by Rustem Umerov, Russia represented by Vladimir Medinsky, and the U.S. attempting to broker the dialogue under the Trump administration.
And the breakdown was remarkably swift.
Very swift. The talks ended abruptly after just 2 hours on the second day.
2 hours. I mean, in diplomatic terms, that barely covers opening statements and translations.
The official language used to describe the meetings was businesslike.
Which is standard diplomatic code for cold, unproductive, and completely deadlocked.
Precisely. And the core disagreement remains absolute. Russia is demanding a complete Ukrainian withdrawal from the Donbas, alongside legally binding guarantees against any NATO expansion.
And on the other side, Ukraine outright refuses any territorial concessions and is demanding firm, actionable security guarantees before any ceasefire. There is virtually zero overlap there. They are operating in two entirely different realities of what a resolution looks like.
However, there was a secondary diplomatic development that is worth noting. The U.S. European Command has quietly reestablished a high-level military-to-military dialogue with Russia.
Which might sound contradictory to some listeners given the stalemate we just discussed.
It does seem contradictory, but this isn't about peace negotiations, it's about deconfliction.
Right, risk management.
Exactly. When you have this much hardware, drones, jets, missiles operating in such close proximity, the risk of an accidental strike or a misidentified launch is incredibly high.
They need a direct line to essentially say, we are operating in this sector, do not engage. Or, that radar blip is not a nuclear launch, please stand down.
It's a mechanism to prevent accidental escalation into a broader war, even while the proxy war continues.
And speaking of the broader picture, let's look at the European security dynamics. The European Union is trying to present a unified front.
Led by Kaja Kallas, the EU is formulating a very strict set of demands for Russia, requiring the return of abducted children and significant military reductions before any normalization of relations can even be discussed.
But European unity always has its stress points.
And right now, that stress point is Hungary.
Right. The reporting shows Hungary is actively threatening to block a crucial EU loan to Ukraine.
Unless Russian oil shipments to Hungary are resumed.
It's a stark reminder of the fragility of the coalition. You have this high-level security policy being drafted in Brussels, but it's colliding with baseline energy economics in Budapest.
It highlights how economic dependence on Russian energy continues to be a massive security vulnerability for the continent.
And that internal friction isn't just about energy. It's spilling over into defense procurement and straining relations with the United States. Let's unpack the Buy European controversy.
This is a major structural shift. The EU is heavily pushing policies to procure arms exclusively from European manufacturers.
The core philosophy there is strategic autonomy. They want to rebuild their own defense industrial base so they aren't entirely reliant on Washington.
On paper, it makes perfect sense for Europe. But the U.S., specifically the Trump administration, is opposing this directive quite aggressively.
Warning that it restricts U.S. defense firms from the European market and threatening retaliatory trade measures.
But the U.S. argument isn't just economic. They are emphasizing NATO interoperability.
Right. If France, Germany, and Poland are all buying different domestically produced systems, the concern is that they won't integrate seamlessly on a unified battlefield.
Exactly. The U.S. wants a standardized shield. Europe wants an independent shield. It's a classic friction between long-term strategic independence and immediate alliance cohesion.
While the politicians debate procurement, the actual threat landscape is shifting into the shadows. Let's look at the intelligence regarding hybrid warfare.
Western intelligence agencies have flagged a major operational shift within the Wagner Group.
They're repurposing their recruiters.
Yes. Instead of just funneling infantry to the front lines, they are reportedly organizing sabotage operations across Europe.
We are talking about arson at logistics hubs, vandalism of rail networks, disrupting supply chains.
It is low-tech, but high-impact. It's designed to destabilize NATO countries internally, creating fear and friction without crossing the threshold that would trigger an Article 5 collective defense response.
It's the definition of a gray zone tactic. But the threats aren't just low-tech. Let's discuss the space domain.
This is perhaps the most severe strategic warning in the current intelligence brief. NATO and Western intelligence are tracking Russia's potential development and deployment of nuclear weapons in space.
Specifically designed to target satellites.
Right. Whether it's a kinetic nuclear detonation or a nuclear-powered electronic warfare jammer, the goal is to blind the adversary.
If you take out the satellite constellations, you instantly degrade modern military communication, GPS targeting, and civilian financial networks.
It's an asymmetric capability that could level the playing field against a technologically superior force.
Despite these looming threats, international support for Ukraine is adapting. The UK just announced a significant funding package.
Yes, under the PURL initiative, the UK has allocated $205 million specifically to purchase U.S. weapons for Ukraine.
So the UK is effectively acting as a financial bridge there.
And at the same time, we are seeing the European drone initiative taking shape.
This is fascinating. 5 allied nations collaborating to manufacture drones.
But what makes it unique is that they are directly leveraging Ukraine's real-time battlefield experience. They are crowdsourcing research and development from the trenches to build better systems.
It's a rapid iteration cycle that traditional defense contractors usually take years to complete.
Now, we focused heavily on the international and battlefield dynamics. Let's pivot and look at the domestic Russian context.
Right, because wars are ultimately sustained or lost on the home front. What are the economic indicators telling us?
The Russian state is essentially absorbing the industrial base to sustain the conflict. Look at KAMAZ, the massive Russian truck manufacturer.
The reports indicate they have shifted nearly half of their total production to fulfill defense orders.
And that is largely because civilian demand has completely weakened. The state is stepping in as the primary customer to keep the factories running.
It's a wartime economy in the truest sense, but you can't build trucks without workers, which brings us to the demographic issue.
The demographic decline in Russia is accelerating, compounded heavily by the casualties we discussed earlier.
And their domestic policy response is quite telling.
They're floating proposals to extend state child care payments up to 3 years. It's a direct attempt to incentivize population growth and stabilize a shrinking workforce.
It shows a long-term anxiety about the survival of the state apparatus itself.
Absolutely. Now, amidst all this heavy geopolitical data, there was one story in the Stylo feed that stood out simply because of how unusual it is.
The oddity story. We always like to find these details that highlight the strange realities of a globalized world in conflict.
This involves a customs interception in St. Petersburg. Authorities seized a 2.5-ton fragment of the ancient Alatai meteorite.
2.5 tons of space rock.
Yes. And it was actively being smuggled from Russia to the United Kingdom.
It sounds like a movie plot, but it actually illustrates a very real dynamic.
It does. It shows that even with heavy sanctions, militarized borders, and a massive kinetic war, illicit cross-border trade is still functioning.
The shadow economy finds a way. If smugglers can move a multi-ton meteorite across a heavily monitored war zone, it speaks volumes about the porosity of these borders.
And the sheer demand for capital by any means necessary.
And these ripples of instability are truly global. We even saw reports of labor reform protests in Buenos Aires, Argentina, escalating into violence this week.
While Argentina is geographically removed from Eastern Europe, it is subjected to the same global inflationary pressures and supply chain shocks exacerbated by this war. It's a symptom of a broader systemic fragility.
Everything is connected. So, for you listening, trying to anticipate the next phase of this conflict, what are the key indicators we should be watching in the coming weeks?
Based on the intelligence, there are 3 primary areas to monitor. First, the continuation of the Geneva talks.
Even though the high-level talks broke down?
Yes, because often the lower-level technical working groups will continue their dialogues quietly in the background. If those technical channels go dark, diplomatic avenues are truly closed.
Okay, what is the second indicator?
The battlefield logistics hubs, specifically the northern parts of Pokrovsk and Mirnograd.
The areas facing intensified Russian pressure right now.
Correct. If Ukrainian forces cannot hold those specific northern lines, the broader logistical supply chain for the Eastern Front becomes critically compromised.
And the third area to watch?
The European Union directives. Look for the updated EU Defense Procurement Directive expected in Q3 of 2026.
That will be the document that tells us if the EU is doubling down on the Buy European strategy, or if they are compromising to maintain harmony with U.S. defense contractors.
Exactly. It will be a concrete indicator of where European strategic autonomy is actually heading.
Before we wrap up, let's look at the social media sentiment analysis provided by Stylo News. It's vital to understand how these events are being processed by the public.
The sentiment is deeply, deeply divided across different information ecosystems.
In Western and NATO-aligned audiences, The support for Ukraine remains largely solid, but the underlying anxiety has shifted.
The data shows that the anxiety isn't just about battlefield outcomes anymore, it's focused on alliance unity.
The friction with Hungary, the US-EU procurement disputes, that is what is driving worry among Western observers.
Meanwhile, the Russian domestic channels present a completely different reality.
They are heavily insulated.
Very insulated. The sentiment there is overwhelmingly focused on narratives of defensive valor against Western aggression. The staggering casualty figures we discussed are simply not penetrating that ecosystem.
It's two distinct realities, which makes any future diplomatic reconciliation that much harder to achieve.
Indeed.
Well, that brings us to the end of our analysis for today. If you found the depth of this briefing valuable, it is entirely powered by Stylo News.
Which is an incredibly powerful tool for anyone who wants to cut through the noise. It is available as both a mobile and computer application.
You can actually download it and customize your own personal, intelligence-style briefs. It aggregates data from hundreds of traditional news sources, as well as real-time feeds from platforms like X.
You are getting AI-powered news on demand, tailored to the specific regions or topics you need to track.
So we highly encourage you to visit www.stylonews.com to subscribe and set up your own customized dashboard.
It changes how you process the news.
It really does. Thank you all for joining us for this deep dive. We know these are heavy, complex topics, but staying informed with objective data is the best way to navigate them.
Thank you for listening.
We'd love to hear from you. You can request topics for future deep dives, and be sure to follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with a thought to mull over. We talked about 5 nations crowdsourcing drone technology directly from the frozen trenches of this war. Consider this: when this conflict eventually ends, what happens when thousands of veterans, deeply trained in autonomous cold-weather drone swarm tactics, return to civilian life across the globe? How will that dispersed, highly lethal knowledge reshape domestic security and law enforcement in our own cities over the next decade? Something to think about. Stay safe, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.